Wow, amazing, amazing. Author Peggy Cassidy. How you doing?
I'm
I'm
doing
doing
very
very
well, thank
well, thank
you.
you. Wow, wow, so good to hear your voice. Well, welcome to the book show, the once learned one book, one author mantra, the global reader cycle, the ultimate podcast that is designed to inspire and motivate a committed reader and a lifelong learner out of every global person. On behalf of a global family and audience, allow me to introduce an amazing soul in the house, Author Peggy Cassidy. Good to have you here.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. So, we are going to be having fun. I can imagine we're going to be having fun. So, before we go into the show, I'd like you to tell us about Author Peggy Cassidy. Who is Author Peggy Cassidy?
Sure.
Sure.
I
I
live in New
live
York
in New York
City,
City,
and I
and
am a
I'm a
professor of
professor of
communication
communication
studies
studies
at
at
Adelphi
Adelphi
University, which
University,
is
which is
just
just
outside of New
outside of
York
New York
City.
City.
Um,
Um,
my
my
background
background
is
is
partly in the
partly in the
arts, in
arts and
dance,
dance
and
and
in
in
musical
musical
theater, and
theater,
I
and I
studied
studied
literature
literature
and
and
theater in
theater in
college, and
college,
then in
and then in
graduate
graduate
school, I
school,
went
I
on
went on
to
to
study
study
media
media
studies and
studies and
communication
communication
studies.
studies.
And
Wow.
so
So
the things
the
that I
things that I
teach and the
teach
things
and
that
the
I
things that
write
I write
about
about
usually have
usually have
something to
something
do
to
with
do with
media
media
history,
history,
often with
often with
something to do
something
with
to do with
media and
media and
children.
children.
Um,
Um,
and I
and
am
I am
also
also
the
the
president of a
president of
group
a
called the
group
New
called the
York
New York
Society for
Society for
General
General
Semantics here
Semantics
in New
here in
York
New York
City.
City.
And I
And
edit
I
a
edit a
journal
journal
called
called
Explorations in
Explorations in
Media
Media
Ecology.
Ecology. Wow, wow, amazing, amazing. Wow, well, Author Peggy Cassidy, on this show, we like you to share with us. Are you an avid and elliptical reader? When did you become an intentional reader, and why would you think why do you think that every person should become a committed reader? Well, first, we like you to share with us when you discovered your journey in this lifelong learning ministry.
Sure.
Sure.
And let me
And
just
let me
quickly
just
say
quickly
up
say
front
up
that
front that
your audio
your
is
audio
cutting
is
out a
cutting
little
out a
bit,
little
but I
bit,
think
but
I
I
know
think
what
I
you're
know what you're
asking. And
asking.
so
And
if at
so
any
if at any
point I
point
seem to
I seem
be
to be
not answering
not
your
answering your
question, then
question,
let me
then
know.
let me know.
But
But well,
I grew
for
up
the purpose of
in a
clarity,
home
Sorry,
where we read
sorry,
a lot.
sorry,
My parents are both educators, and there
sorry,
were always
Peggy,
lots of books
Peggy.
around, and I was
I
always
was
read
always read
too, and then
too, and
I
then I
read a
read
lot
a lot
myself,
myself.
and there was a
There was
local
a
public
local public
library that
library
we
that we
went to
went
all the
to all the
time.
time.
And so,
And so,
I grew
I
up
grew up
reading a
reading a
lot,
lot,
and
and
as soon as
as
I
soon as I
could
could
write, I
write,
was
I was
interested in
interested in
writing as
writing
well.
as
So I was
well. So
always
I was
playing
always
around
playing
with
around with
writing
writing
stories, writing
stories, writing
poems,
poems,
plays,
plays,
anything I could
anything
think
I
to
could
try
think
to
to
write.
try to write.
Although I
Although
never
I
really
never
thought
really
of
thought
myself as
myself
someone
as
who would
someone who would
necessarily
necessarily
become a book
become a
author
book author
someday.
someday.
That was
That
really
was really
more,
more.
I think it
I think it
came,
came.
it sort of
It sort
evolved
of evolved
naturally out
naturally
of
out of
my
my
graduate
graduate
studies,
studies.
excuse me,
Excuse
where
me, where
to earn a
to earn a
PhD, you
PhD, you
basically have to
basically
write a
have to
book.
write
You
a
have
book.
to
You
do a
have to do a
dissertation.
dissertation,
And
and
that
that
dissertation
dissertation
ultimately
ultimately
became
became
my
my
first
first
book
book
because I
because I
essentially
essentially
rewrote
rewrote
it
it
into
into
something more
something more
publishable
publishable
once I
once I
became
became
a full-time
full-time
professor
professor
at Adelphi
at Adelphi
University.
University.
So, and
Wow.
that book,
And
I
that
should
book, I should
say,
say,
was
was
helped
helped
along by
along by
another
another
person
person
who
who
has
has
been a
been a
member or
member or
featured on your
featured on your
podcast,
podcast,
Lance
Lance
Great,
Great,
who
Wow.
I've
who
known for
I've
a
known
very,
for a
very
very,
long
very long
time.
time.
And he
Wow.
was
He was
editing
editing
a book
a book
series
series
in
in
what we call
what we
media
call media
ecology.
ecology,
And he
and he
recognized
recognized
my
my
dissertation as
dissertation as
something that
something
could
that could
be
be
a good
a
book for
good
that
book for that
series. And
series.
so
And
it was
so it
on
was
his
on his
recommendation that
recommendation
I
that I
proposed the
posed
book
the
and
book and
then
then
researched and
researched
wrote
and
it.
wrote it.
So that was
So that
how
was how
my first
my
book
first
came
book
to
came to
be. And
be.
then the
And then the
second
second
book
book
came out of the first one in the sense that there were all these interesting ideas that I encountered while I was writing the first book that really didn't fit into that book, but I knew I wanted to do something with them. And so that's where I realized, oh wait, this could also be a book. And a few years later, I researched and wrote that one.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Well, Author Peggy, for the purpose of our audience, we'd like you to share with us. We'd like you to share with us. At what point did you realize that you had become this intentional reader? Like, when did you discover that reading was just this order of the day for you?
That's a very good question. Um, I think for me it was very, very early. I'm not even sure because I always loved reading. For example, when I was in kindergarten, which in the United States, that would be your first year of real school, so I was probably 5 years old,
Wow.
and I had the chickenpox virus, which in my case made me really sick. I was home from school for at least a week, at least the way I remember it. And I don't really remember anything about that week, except I remember very clearly that my school had a reading teacher who sent home this enormous pile of books for me. And I remember thinking that was just the greatest thing. I was so happy that this pile of books came home for me to read while I was homesick from school.
Wow.
So I don't know if I could say that in that moment as a 5-year-old, I realized that this lifelong reading thing was for me, but I certainly always knew that I loved to read, and that has not changed over the years.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Well, being a professor, it seems that you navigate a lot of command in this world of reading. So I'd like you to share with us, how have you been able to use your influence as an author, your influence as a reader to create a profound moment and lasting legacies in the life of your students? How do you think your reading lifestyle have been able to help you shape a life for them? Have you made them fall in love with reading?
Well, that's a good question too. I think what I try to do with my students, obviously I try to get them to read things because it's a big part of the college education to read critically and carefully and to learn
that's the
from
bigger part. That's a
things
bigger
that other
part.
people have written. But I
Peggy,
also, on
Peggy,
another level, I like to try to model for them the what it's like to be a reading person, someone who loves to read, who does it for fun, just for the pleasure of reading. So I like to try to make references to things that I have read, not even to try to persuade them to read those things that I have read and loved, but to see that reading is something that they can also love to do. You know, if they find the things that they love to read,
yeah.
I would love to think that they pick that up from me.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Well, on the occasion of the one student, one book, one author mantra, we have an amazing soul in the house, Author Peggy Cassidy. And trust me, you can't afford to miss this session. You have a lot to learn. Well, Peggy Cassidy, I'd like to ask you, being a social media expert, what do you think, what have you discovered are the ways social media can be used to influence the reading culture globally? I'm sure you go why I ask.
Sure. I think it's interesting because on the one hand, sometimes we blame social media for harming reading, for turning people away from books and difficult and long texts in favor of the quick kinds of easy things that we can encounter on social media.
Yeah.
However, I also think that social media can be a great way to do a lot of good things with respect to reading. This podcast is a perfect example, right? The fact that
Yeah.
you and I are only aware of each other's existence and talking to one another because we were connected through social media.
Yeah.
And it can be a great way to spread the word about interesting things to read. It can give authors a platform for their writing. We don't have to publish a book. You don't have to have your manuscript accepted by a conventional publisher anymore to get your thoughts out to the world. So it's a great, it has a lot of potential at least to put authors in touch with potential readers.
Mm. Amazing. Amazing. Wow. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about your journey into authorhood. Obviously, it seems you are trying to solve a problem. So we ask, what kind of problems do you see your writings trying to solve? And who would you say are your target audience?
My books specifically are focused on on media history, especially in the lives of children and in the context of American public education. And I'm happy to explain that in a little more detail at some point here. But in that sense, they are written primarily for either people in the subject areas studying things like communications or media or history or education studies. But they also, I made a point of writing them in a way that I hope is accessible to really any interested person, regardless of whether they're at an academic institution or whether they have any academic grounding in any of those disciplines. So I like to think that they are potentially for a broad audience, of really anyone who's curious about the role that media play in the lives of children.
Amazing. Amazing. Gets to the part of the show where we would have you take us into your bookstore. Well, we've always believed that you would never have written anything unless you should have read or experienced so much. But here is it on the show. You would have to name 10 books that has made a significant difference for you. And you would also get to talk about the book or also get to talk about the authors that made this huge impact in your career as a lifelong learner. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Well, Peggy Cassidy, we got you. We like to follow your flow. We're listening. Go on. Number one.
Okay, number one, I'm going to start with a few authors who were really central in my training as a communication scholar. So for that, I would say the author Neil Postman, really his collected works, but if I name one book, I would say it's Amusing Ourselves to Death. And then a second choice, number two, would be his colleague, also at New York University, where I studied, Christine Nystrom, whose work has recently been compiled and published into a 2-volume set called The Genes of Culture, Genes, like as in genes of culture. So that's two.
That's number two. Yeah, go on. Number three.
Number three. Let's see. Okay, this is more from my childhood, but some of those books were really very powerful for me and books that I have come back to a lot. The Chronicles of Narnia, the C.S. Lewis books, which
Mm.
really, that's a lot of books. That's like 8 or 9, but we can count it as one.
Yeah.
But all of those, The Lion, The Wardrobe, and
Amazing.
all the others.
Amazing. Thank you for making it easier for us. So we have number four.
Number 4, let's see. Also from my childhood, a book called Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. I don't know if that is internationally known, but it's a beautiful, um, not so much young children's book because it's what we call a chapter book, not a picture book, but it's a beautiful story that I have always loved.
Mm. Amazing. You got this. Number five. Go on.
Let's see. Um, I love the novel To Kill a Mockingbird
Wow.
by
Mm.
Harper Lee. And actually,
Mm.
why don't we also include then uh, Harper Lee, before she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, or before it took that form, she wrote an earlier version called Go Set a Watchman, which was only recently published. And what's so fascinating about reading the two books is that they're totally different. And you can very easily see why To Kill a Mockingbird is a classic and Go Set a Watchman maybe wasn't or wouldn't have been. But it's just amazing as a writer of books, it's amazing to see how the original version of the story was transformed. It's the same characters, but it's just a completely different book, and I found it fascinating.
Amazing. Amazing. That would be number five. So we're looking at number six. Wow. Amazing. Author
Okay,
Peggy Cassidy. You got this. You got this. Keep it going.
let's see. Number 6. Um, Gosh, there's so many. Okay, The Diary of Anne Frank is a
Mm.
book that I've read many times, and I don't even know where to start in terms of how compelling that book is and how heartbreaking and important it is, I think, to connect us so closely to the experience of that particular person, um, and to understand how many people were impacted in ways similar to her experience in World War II.
Wow. Amazing. Number seven.
Number 7. Um, Mark Twain, Huckleberry Finn
Mm.
is a beautifully written book and such an interesting look at American society in a very problematic time.
So that will pass for number seven. Author Peggy. Number eight.
I'm sorry, I just lost you for a second. Are you waiting for number 8?
Sure, we're waiting on number eight. Yeah,
Okay,
you got
let's
this.
see. Let's see. Number 8. Nicholas Kristof is a New York Times journalist
Mm.
who has also written a number of books, and there's one that he wrote with his wife called Half the Sky. I think this was about
Mm.
10 years ago, about
Mm.
some of their investigative and human rights related journalistic work around the world.
Mm.
Um, that's a really good one.
Yeah, true, true. Number nine, go on. You got this.
Number nine. Let's see. There's
You
so
got
many. Okay,
this.
I like Trevor Noah's autobiography called Born a Crime,
Mm.
where he writes about growing up in South Africa, and his just his experience growing up as a mixed race person who didn't quite fit into any place because of that, but how he found his way through the early parts of his life.
Wow, wow, wow. We get to number 10. Author Peggy Cassidy, you got
Number
this.
10.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with oh gosh. I loved the autobiography. John Lewis, a civil rights activist here in the
Mm,
United States,
mm,
one of his autobiographical books is called Walking with the Wind, where he
mm,
writes about his childhood and his upbringing and his work in the American civil rights movement,
mm.
and how he learned about the concept of nonviolent protest, and how it works and what it's done and how it was used in the civil rights movement. And I
Wow.
really enjoyed reading that.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Author Peggy, you've been so amazing on the show. Well, I have been engrossed and I'm very full of gratitude for how disciplined and how committed you've been to the world of books, authors, and the reading culture. Thank you very much for being an expert. Thank you. You would pass for a room full of book, Professor.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Wow, we get to this part of the show where I would love to ask you for our audience globally. Why would you, Otto Peggy Cassidy, need every person to become this committed reader and a lifelong learner? Why would you want every person to see lifelong learning as an asset so far human developmental culture is concerned?
Well, I think that for one thing, reading is one of the best ways that we can get into the minds of other people and kind of try on their perspective and look around from their point of view. And uh, in any time and any place, but certainly in this very complicated, globally connected world that we're in, the more
Yeah.
we can try to see multiple perspectives, the better for all of us.
Hmm.
So I think reading is a great way to do that.
Hmm.
And lifelong learning through any form, but especially through reading books, um, is it's not only good for us and for the world. I mean, I think it's very enjoyable, and it can be
Hmm.
so exciting to always discover
Hmm.
something different that you didn't know before.
Hmm.
Uh, I love that. I just love to do that, and so I
Well, well,
try to,
Otto Peggy, talking about that, discovering something you've never known once or before. I'd like to ask you for our audience, would you be willing to share with us, if you can remember, a time when an idea or knowledge or a perspective you had read in a book had helped you solve a problem? I'd like to ask again, if there's a time in your life when a knowledge, an idea you had encountered from a book had helped you solve a problem in reality, in real life. Do you remember a time like that?
that's an excellent question, and I'm sure there have been plenty of times like that. So I think, let's see. I know for sure that reading a number of different people's autobiographies, um, people like John Lewis, Maya Angelou, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Hmm.
I come from a performing arts background, so some people from the world of performing arts, reading their autobiographies may not give me a specific answer to a problem I'm trying to solve, but it shows me that even when things are very difficult for people, they often find ways to persevere through the
Hmm.
situation they're in. And so
Hmm.
it may be a more general answer, but the idea that um, I can take that knowledge from those people's stories and use it in my own experience,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
whether it's to do what those people did or just to know that this is something that people can do, including me.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. You've been so beautiful and sweet on this episode. And I must confess that I have been so humbled. I've been so humbled. But before you go to Peggy, I'd like you to share with us what would you think would have happened to you, Author Peggy Cassidy, if you were not this lifelong learner? What would you imagine your life to look like if you were not this committed reader? What would you say would have happened to you if you never put in the discipline and the commitment it takes to renew your mind and learn and learn and learn every other day? Share with us, Peggy.
Yes, excellent question again, because I think you're touching on something very important, which is that reading is not always easy, and sometimes it's tempting when you start reading something that's hard to get through to just kind of put it down and walk away from it. And I think it's important to try to stay with it, uh, and kind of wrestle with it a little bit. And so yes, I talk about reading as fun, but it's not always totally fun. It can be hard. It can be upsetting even. Um, but I think for me, if I had not been such a an avid reader and a person who is always trying to learn new things, I don't think my career would have been nearly as interesting. I'm not sure what I would have ended up doing, but I certainly would
Hmm,
not be an academic career. And
hmm,
and I would not have encountered so many of the people I have gotten to meet
hmm,
through my reading related activities and some of the
hmm,
places I'm able to
hmm,
travel to as a result. I think a lot
hmm,
of ideas just never have occurred to me.
hmm, hmm, hmm. Peggy, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being an amazing soul, and thank you for staying honest and committed to your journey as a lifelong learner. Indeed, we are reaping this asset. Thank you for being this amazing soul.
Oh, well,
Well,
thank you so much
we get to
for talking with me about it.
yeah, we get to this point on the show, Peggy, where I like you to leave us by telling us about your book and why every person should read your book and how we can find your book.
Good question. So I have written two books. One is called Bookends: The Changing Media Environment of American Classrooms. And one is called Children, Media, and American History. And the subtitle is Printed Poison, Pernicious Stuff, and Other Terrible Temptations. So the
Mm,
first book, Bookends, is published by Hampton Press here in the US. And I assume it is available through the publisher, through Hampton Press. The other book is published by Routledge here in the US, and I know it's on places like Amazon. Um, the first book, Bookends, that was the one that was originally my doctoral dissertation in graduate school. And
mm,
what I was trying to do with Bookends was to, um, it was so interesting to see how people want to use new technology in schools today, with children. And I'm not opposed to that, but some of the promises that people seem to be making about how schools would just be transformed with technology. And I
yeah,
thought, it just doesn't sound as simple as that to me. And looking back as a media historian, I knew that people said the same things about radio in the 1920s and 30s, and about film, movies in that same era, and about television. And if you go back farther, people were saying that about chalkboards and
yeah,
maps and globes and just all kinds of earlier media. And
yeah.
so what I tried to do in the bookends was to um, just look more carefully at what people hope to do when they want to bring a new medium into schools, and how it does or doesn't fit into that context, and why, so that we can be more thoughtful about how we try to do that today.
Wow,
And then the other book, Children, Media, and American History, is more about the history of media in the lives of American children outside of the classroom. That today, when we talk about new media like social media and what it's going to mean for children, we're often very worried. And I understand. I have kids, and I completely understand. And I think we have reasons to be worried. But I also find it interesting that whenever a medium is new, there are adults who are panicking about what will happen to the children. And
Yeah.
so again, I look back to television and radio and comic books and even things like novels. It's funny that some of the things that we think of now as what we wish children would read, when they were new, adults were terribly afraid of their kids
Yeah.
reading things like
Yeah.
novels. So,
Yeah.
so again, I tried to kind of look through, and this is in the context of American history. I'm sure I would love to know more about how this looks in other parts of the world. But to look through and see what is it that frightens us, and then what happened. What ended up coming of those concerns, and how can we use that to think better about today.
Wow, amazing. I happen to learn a lot from this conversation. And even if we always try to be very optimistic when a new media comes up, the platforms, but we always get very worried about our children, our young people, what is in this media for them. That was a very mind blowing one, Author Peggy Cassidy. That was
Sure.
a
And
mind blowing one.
yeah, I mean, I find it very interesting. And as I say, I don't really take sides on this because I think there are some great possibilities for kids and new media. And then there are some ways that kids might have access to information that they don't know quite what to do with, or that's coming from people who don't necessarily have children's best interests at heart. And
Hmm.
so, it's a lot to think about.
Wow, that has been the global shared concern. How do we get to save what we have left after we see everything we've lost? Well, Otopegidi, you are an expert and a very huge asset, a very massive asset in this world of creativity, reading, and books. And I'm sure that we would be privileged to have you during our global reading campaign and auto store, to be on our Zoom meeting, Breathe, our webinars, so you get to share in details and depth this thing of ours, this thing you enjoy doing, this thing you enjoy sharing, and this thing you enjoy talking about. We'll be looking forward to have you on our other sessions and our other activities during this global reading campaign. It has been a very humble experience for me. I must say, I have been really engrossed. Thank you very much for representing so much. Thank you. I appreciate all of what you do.
Oh, you're very, very welcome, and thank you for talking with me.
Wow. On occasion of one book, one student, one author mantra, author Peggy Cassidy have been so super incredible on the session. And I'm sure you would become the books you read and the people you meet. And trust me, author Peggy wants you to read the book and not just read the book. She wants you to share a review with your friend on your different social media handle, and also you also have to tell your friends, your family about Author Peggy Cassidy, because you are going to be learning so much from following this credible soul. Trust me, it has been an amazing time on the session with Author Peggy Cassidy. Wow, Author Peggy, before you go, what will be your last words to this person who is yet to read a book what would be your last word to this person who has access to books but would never find the time to invest in devouring those books? And what would you give to this person who is going through a time, tough moments, and doesn't know where to start? Well, what would be your advice to the downtrodden and all of this depressed souls? Please leave your last words.
Oh my goodness. I think that they should try to find any book that can really speak to them. And
Mm,
luckily now there are
mm,
lots of ways to do that. I mean, if you
mm,
have access to a public library,
mm,
librarians can be
mm,
amazing for this. If
mm,
not, you can look on Amazon reviews of books to just try to find something that catches your attention enough that you want to try it out and then keep reading it and find if you're not if you try one and it's not working for you, it's okay. You don't have to finish it. Move on. Keep trying,
mm,
and something clicks for you, and from
mm,
there you start to know what else you want to read.
mm,
What else did this person write, or what else is like this book that I might want to read next.
mm. Author Peggy Cassidy, for the purpose of clarification, I'd like you to reaffirm our thoughts from listening to you. Are you saying that the answers any person is seeking could be stuck in a book they are yet to read?
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow, that's super incredible. Well, if you're streaming this, like I said, you can't afford to miss this session and you can't afford not to share this episode with your friends and family. Obviously, the books you read and the people you meet. Trust me, Otopeki Cassidy will be willing to take you by our hands. And trust me, this global community will forge this rapport, this winning rapport, to see you and your reading lifestyle, your reading journey soar. Author Cassidy, it has been a singular opportunity and privilege, a very huge privilege on behalf of our global community, Guardian Cross Podcast. I am very humbled. Thank you very much for being a guest. Thank you. Thank you. We do appreciate.
Thank you too.
Wow. Thank you very much, everyone who is streaming this session. And like our tradition is, we are going to be leaving author Peggy Cassidy's book link on our podcast notes so you can have a chance to meet her and have a chance to devour our writings. And trust me, you don't need to do this alone. You need to tell your friends and your family about author Peggy Cassidy. Trust me, she's an expert. So far, this evolving social media and the world of communication is concerned, you would always have so much to learn from her. It has been your host, Smart Stewart Udo. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our guest, Peggy Cassidy. Thank you.
Thanks so much.